Japanese folklore tells of the night parade of 100 demons, which has been illustrated in colorful artworks and folktales for a millennium. In depictions of the night parade, we see iconic creatures of Japanese folklore, like the devilish Oni and the unmistakable Tengu, alongside creatures which resemble everyday objects, umbrellas with eyes hopping alongside instruments which play themselves, many-faced creatures made from theatrical masks, illuminated by floating lanterns emanating a ghostly glow. These are the Tsukumogami, household items which have gained spirits of their own. Echoing earlier traditions, in medieval Japan, Tsukumogami feature in ghost stories and spiritual allegories alike. Like their fellow Yōkai, or Japanese spiritual creatures, these animated household items are part of a living and changing folklore that informs Japanese culture even today. And by encountering Tsukumogami, we are also brought to more deeply consider how we relate to the things in our lives. My name is Sean. Welcome to Mythos and Logos. The creatures called Yōkai today were once known by the name Mononoke, which can be translated as mysterious things. They are fantastic, supernatural beings which fill the world, from remote marshes and mountain passes to village outskirts and urban centers. And while it wouldn't be quite right to call yokai ghosts, they are the figures behind the bumps in the night and our unexplainable experiences. In a traditional Japanese view of the world as being filled with spirits, yokai are taken quite seriously. Texts dating back to classical Japan tell of divining rituals to predict the nights when the mysterious creatures would roam free and parade through the streets of the capital. Residents would avoid the area entirely, and stories tell of how they would close their blinds and recite protective prayers, as even looking at the night parade of these demons could be fatal. In early references, the night parade consists mainly of the devilish Oni, creatures who deserve an essay of their own. But by medieval times, they are joined by the Tsukumogami, a name which references their age and the spirit within. Tsukumogami are the household items that have reached 99 years in age. After so long, the items begin to transform into monsters like the parading demons. Some say that the Tsukumogami are angered at the extravagance of rich families, and others that it is old objects that were not disposed of properly that undergo the metamorphosis. But in either case, after years of being used by humans, the Tsukumogami take on a haunting life of their own. Now, it may be difficult to imagine inanimate objects sprouting legs and taking on their own life. After all, the origin of the English word inanimate is from Latin, meaning without spirit. But animistic cultures, like that of Japanese tradition, understand the world as being full of spirits, only some of which are human. Past essays have explored the kami, or awe-inspiring spirits of the natural world, and the system of Shinto, the spirit way, which reveres them. But even those of us from less animistic cultures can experience some sense of this in family heirlooms or antiques, objects which are more than the matter which makes them up. And once we acknowledge that some kind of spirit can dwell within the items we use, it's not as hard to imagine an experience in which, having been slighted, they come to haunt us. With this context in mind, we can approach the Tsukumogami, a medieval Buddhist ghost story that tells us most historically about these creatures. The story begins as families are busy with the cleaning that welcomes the Lunar New Year. Alleys and byways throughout the city fill with items that, angry at being discarded, plot their revenge. The animated objects have character. The novice chain, a set of prayer beads, asks its fellows to set aside their desire for revenge. but a brutish man's club beats the beads away. Professor Classics, a scroll of Chinese-influenced texts, leads a ritual invoking a kami of creation that transforms them into Tsukumogami. And now fully transformed into yokai, the Tsukumogami act the part, setting up drinking and gambling dens outside the capital and abducting animals and humans alike to feast on. While they visually resemble household tools, in action the Tsukumogami are truly demonic, with many details of the Tsukumogami-ki mirroring the famous story of the demonic Shutendoji, an oni who terrorized the capital of classical Japan, and a likely candidate for a future Halloween story. Those already familiar with the Shutendoji story and its action-packed climax might expect a samurai to come and battle the Tsukumogami, but it is not a traditional warrior who confronts the creatures, rather a group of Buddhist angels. The angels reflect the esoteric tradition of Shingon Buddhism, which had become especially prominent in medieval Japan. Most schools of Buddhism view enlightenment as requiring the cultivation of karma over many lifetimes, a process which often takes millions of years. The Shingon school, on the other hand, proposes enlightenment even in a single lifetime. That is not only for monks or even unique to humankind. In his commentary on the Mahavairocana Sutra, the monk Kukai, who founded the Shingon school, urges one to look inward for the enlightened mind, the seed of enlightenment and Buddha nature within all sentient beings. The sutra declares, "The enlightened mind is the cause. Great compassion is the root, and the use of skillful means is the ultimate. Enlightenment is to know your own mind as it really is. Seek in your own mind enlightenment and all-embracing wisdom. Why? Because it is originally pure and bright." With this vision in mind, we can see the angels which appear to the Tsukumogami in the story as showing the reach of this teaching. Even the most depraved people, indeed even the demonic Tsukumogami, can turn around. The Tsukumogami repent and are instructed by the set of animated prayer beads, now known as the Holy Chain, in the ways of Shingon Buddhism. The Tsukumogami-ki ends with an explicit call for the reader to embrace Shingon teachings, though it only concludes one chapter of our study. Tsukumogami, like other yokai, are not confined to the pages of history, but are ever-changing parts of our world through today. In the 20th century, a piece of art depicted Tsukumogami of candles and lanterns running from the electric devices that would replace them. And in the 21st century, they have adapted to new media like anime and manga, as well as informing contemporary relationships between people and objects. In general, contemporary Tsukumogami are far less frightening than their ancient counterparts. The manga-turned-anime We Rent Tsukumogami explores the relationships between people and objects in early modern Japan as the creatures solve problems and mysteries. And while some of the Tsukumogami are outwardly bitter towards humans for buying and selling them, the overall dynamic between humans and their objects is symbiotic. In the series, it is not bitter, discarded objects, but especially treasured ones that transform into Tsukumogami. And the objects still have opinions and desires of their own, but they're nowhere near as harsh as those of their medieval counterparts, and clever humans are able to cooperate with them for mutual benefit. A far cry from the monstrous yokai of the past with which they take offense at being compared. And we can bring the spirit of Tsukumogami into our relationships with the objects in our immediate surroundings as well. Take the work of the author and tidying guru Marie Kondo, for example. While the life-changing magic of tidying up does not feature any transforming creatures, her KonMari method of organizing begins by thanking the home in which she works, then going through objects one by one, keeping those which spark joy and discarding those that do not, but not without thanking them for their service. In a Telegraph interview, Kondo explores how her time as a Shinto shrine maiden provides a uniquely Japanese character to her method, pondering that treating objects as living things must be peculiar for her foreign audiences. If it is indeed cherished objects that become Tsukumogami today, as the anime suggests, then the objects which spark joy when we reflect on them are off to a good start. And if, as in older stories, the objects which are mindlessly discarded return to haunt their former owners, then pausing to consider and thank objects for their service can cut down on the number of vengeful spirits parading through the night. In the long tradition of Tsukumogami, we find demonic hauntings and helpful companions alike, yet the range of experiences each come in the familiar forms of the objects we encounter every day. As we turn our minds to the objects around us, we too can wonder what type of spirits they hold. Whether we are haunted or helped by them may very well be in the hands of a Buddhist angel, or perhaps the difference between the helpful and haunting spirits may lie in our relationships with them. In our modern world, driven by industrial manufacturing and consumption, we are surrounded by more objects than ever before, and while victims of medieval Tsukumogami were devoured quite literally, we can still stop to consider whether our objects serve us or if we are being consumed by them. We can ask ourselves if our habits are respectful of the spirits of our objects, or indeed respectful of the human spirits, moving the hands which make them. And if, as in the Tsukumogami key, it is the objects disposed of improperly that come back to haunt us, we can take care not to buy things just to throw them away, especially after a single use. Otherwise, only time can tell how their ghosts may return to haunt us. I personally try to make fewer purchases and make them second-hand whenever possible, as the most effective actions come first in reduce, reuse, and recycle. At the same time, we can feel the spirits in the objects we cherish. The comforts of a stuffed animal, the memories of an heirloom, and the love and longing in an old photo album are precious beyond the materials that make them. When I helped clean my parents' apartment for a move, I found memories of a long-lost friend echoing my own past, and testaments to generations of love, the helpful and warming presence of that which we hold closest to our hearts. And as yokai fill the mysterious places in the edges of our world, Tsukumogami draw our attention to the spirits of the objects around us, something that we can do even if we don't catch them sprouting legs. Tsukumogami have long lived and changed alongside humans, and since we show no sign of ending our use of objects anytime soon, we can expect them to continue to live and change alongside us for years to come. The key to whether these relationships will be haunting or helpful may, like the Shingon secret to enlightenment, lie within our own minds.